On May 28, 1453, history was made in a day. On that date, Constantinople, capital city of the Eastern Roman Empire, fell to the Ottoman Turks. After 2100 years, the mighty Roman Empire ended. The world that had existed for centuries would be fundamentally transformed in a few short decades in ways no one could have possibly predicted on that day. But whether mankind knew it or not, no one would escape the effects of the history of this day. This video is presented by History in Days. This channel will focus on how the events of a single day can change history in ways no one could predict at the time. We will be publishing a series of short, 10-minute videos for all 365 days of the year. If you like history from a different perspective or are just curious about how and why events interconnect, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And to receive notices of our new videos, please also click on the bell. And we will see you in your history in days that follow. For thousands of years, since the earliest civilizations, Europeans viewed a world that looked like this. They had knowledge of Europe, Asia and parts of Africa. But they had no knowledge of the existence of the continents of the Western Hemisphere. In all the thousands of years that civilization had existed in both the Eastern and Western Hemispheres, mankind had never developed the technology necessary to explore their entire world. Then, just 40 short years after the fall of the Roman Empire, mankind embarked on a great adventure utilizing new technologies. The world had completely changed forever. Suddenly, it looked like this. To understand why this seismic change occurred in such a short time frame, we need to understand the effects the final demise of the Roman Empire had on the basic makeup of the world. To do that, we need to see history in days. By 289 BC, Roman Emperor Diocletian had realized the empire had grown too large for one man to rule. His solution was to divide the administration of the empire into two halves, the western, centered at Rome, and the eastern, centered at Constantinople. In 476, the city of Rome was pillaged by the Goths, and the Western Roman Empire came to an end. But incredibly, the Eastern Roman Empire flourished for another 1,000 years. Although its size varied and it slowly shrank, the Eastern Roman Empire and its capital Constantinople remained a Mediterranean power for 1,000 years. Surrounded by water on three sides and enclosed by impregnable walls, Constantinople defied all attempts to conquer it for 10 centuries. While it stood, it served as the last outpost of the Roman Empire. It also safeguarded European access to the trade route known as the Silk Road. For over 1,400 years, the Silk Road was the primary trade route between Europe, the Middle East and the Far East. Stretching from Constantinople in the west to India and China, known as the East Indies, the Silk Road became the primary creator of wealth for the civilizations using it. It was the only source of many of the goods transported on it and the economic foundation of the societies which depended on free access to it. One of thousands who traveled on and profited from the trade on the Silk Road was Marco Polo. The fabled court of Kublai Khan was created, in large part, from the riches made possible by access to this essential trade route. Everyday items such as horses, paper, glassware, wine, tapestries, cucumbers, grapes, carpets, jade, and of course, silk, became basic necessities. And the trade in these commodities became the economic foundation of the civilizations of the pre-modern world. Situated at the western terminus of the Silk Road, Roman Constantinople ensured European merchants access to this vital trade route. Beginning in the early 1300s, a new force, the Ottoman Turks, arose to challenge the Romans. Slowly their territories surrounded what was left of the once proud dominions of Constantinople. Over centuries, the Ottomans had attempted to conquer the city numerous times without success. Then, the Turks employed a new weapon, ironically made possible by advances fostered by the trade conducted on the Silk Road. On May 28, 1453, after a 55-day siege, Turkish cannon destroyed the fabled walls and Constantinople fell. With it, European access to the Silk Road and all the goods and wealth it provided vanished. This meant that the economic and cultural underpinnings that society had relied upon for thousands of years no longer existed. History had been made. Now let's see what happened as a result in the days that followed. Immediately, European merchants started looking for a new trade route to replace the Silk Road. The problem was, they didn't have many options. One way to reach the Indies was to sail around the entire continent of Africa, then east across the Indian Ocean. But sailing around Africa to get to the Indies wasn't a viable solution in the 1400s. It's still not today. Unpredictable weather, pirates, and the sheer length of the voyage all contributed to make this route impracticable. With Constantinople closed, another possibility to avoid the Ottoman blockade was to go north, then east across the Asian steppes, then turn south to reach China. This meant braving the severe winters prevalent on the northern plains of Asia, making them unpassable for much of the year. Plus, this route was subject to the dangers presented by native nomads who did not welcome foreign merchants crossing their lands. And it was hundreds of miles longer than the direct path of the Silk Road. The fall of Constantinople and closure of the Silk Road even prompted a primitive Suez Canal route. Merchants sailed across the Mediterranean, unloaded their ships, and caravanned across Egypt to the Red Sea. Once there, they reloaded their cargo on ships and sailed east across the Indian Ocean. The unfeasibility of this route in terms of cost and time was quickly apparent. But it also soon became impossible. Shortly after conquering Constantinople, the Ottomans also conquered Egypt and closed this route as well. For a while, it looked like the fall of Constantinople meant the people of Europe and the Indies would just have to accept a new normal of life without the goods and luxuries once provided by their trade. But an unknown Genoese merchant had a new idea to resume the trade that had been lost and restore the foundations of society. To go east, he would sail west. An Italian city-state, Genoa, was one of many particularly hard hit by the loss of Silk Road trade. It had risen to a position of power and influence, based largely by becoming a trade center for the luxury goods from the East Indies. But a young, unknown Genoese native, Christopher Columbus, thought he had the answer. By 1492, most of Europe had suspected for many years that the Earth is round. However, proving it would require a journey into the terrifying unknown, and no good enough reason had ever presented itself. Until now. A world centered on the Roman Empire and the Silk Road had been sufficient for thousands of years. Now that both were gone, a new foundation, a new focus for society was needed. So, like many of his time, Columbus was convinced the Earth is round. In fact, he was counting on it. He reasoned that the quickest way to travel to the East Indies would be to sail around the globe, west from Europe. If he was right, such a route would replace the Silk Road, and all the riches of that trade, the underpinnings of society, would be restored. But an undertaking of this magnitude required more resources than Columbus could ever hope to acquire on his own. He traveled across Europe, seeking support from kings and queens for his theory.
Imagine the wealth and power for the country that discovers the new route to the Indies. That country will control the new Silk Road,
he would exclaim. From kingdom to kingdom he went, trying to convince the rich and powerful to invest in his dream. Finally, the Queen and King of Spain agreed to provide Columbus with 3 small ships, crews and supplies for his voyage to the East Indies. And on August 3, 1492 he set sail. It can only be compared to the first voyage to the moon, with one huge difference. We knew the moon existed. This voyage of Columbus was truly into the unknown. On October 12, 1492, after 10,000 years of little or no change in the horizons of mankind, less than 40 years after the fall of the stagnant, decadent Roman Empire, whose existence had retarded the advance of civilization for thousands of years, having marshaled the resources and technology to brave 2 long months in the unknown vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, and placing his faith in the ability of humanity to sail toward a new unimaginable future, Columbus made landfall. The Earth is round, of course. Columbus had that correct. What he had no way of knowing was the existence of the 2 continents which make up the Western Hemisphere. So when Columbus landed in what he thought was the East Indies and innocently called the natives he encountered Indians, he had not discovered the new Silk Road. In that sense his voyage was a failure. But the world had been intrinsically changed forever. The peoples of the 2 separate hemispheres of Earth had each essentially discovered a previously unknown world. And although the effects of this have been debated ever since, no one denies that fundamental change had occurred. Suddenly, the Roman Empire belonged to antiquity. The ancient world was now officially in the past and began to fade into the mists of time. Advances in technology, government, finances and the structure of society accelerated. In the blink of an eye, the modern world had been created and taken its first steps. The fall of Constantinople had indeed created the incentive for mankind to expand horizons. And it all began on that fateful day when the Roman Empire ceased to exist. May 28, 1453. A history in days.